my fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually, the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plan in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid. and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals
So
are
do you
not
think
impinged.
do you think
Number
COVID
one.
do you think
And number
COVID do you
two,
think COVID
if I may,
do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over a cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. And the media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament,
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be on the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, They get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me, and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show, but if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, one of the 4 principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbunda women who supposedly had been their victims.
But these were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort. Totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
everybody, welcome into the show. This is Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we tend to cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. And we have a very busy show for you on this Wednesday. Good to see all of you. Let us know where you're joining us from. Jack, by the way, if you subscribe to the show live, because we're live right now, your name will pop up here on the big board. So if you subscribe, whether on Rumble or on YouTube, your name will pop up there on the big board. But we've got a lot of busy stories we're going to cover tonight. We're going to talk about what's unbelievably and hidden in a bunker inside of Ukraine they don't want you to know about, but we have the video. We're going to dive into what's actually happening with the babies that are being harvested inside Ukraine.
Plus, Patrick Lancaster shows us what is done with those tanks that the West sends that they don't keep track of. Guess what? They actually can be used for the other side. We have reporting on that. Plus, we have a guest who wants to make the parallel. Is Ukraine headed for a future as the next Middle East? What does that mean? We're going to let our guest break this down. This is an interview where I guess we are all being asked to wonder, why do we swallow war rhetoric when we've been through this before? Don't we have a template? Don't we not want this? These are some questions we're going to push ourselves to ask collectively.
All right. And we're also going to look at both. We got an ABC reporter who's caught on a hot mic about COVID lies.
This is amazing.
Yeah, we're going to play that for you. Plus, Justin Trudeau better get ready because something big is about to happen in Canada. Millions of people could be taking to the streets in protest, a part of a million-person march against the LGBTQ plus LTYVZ XYZ WWF agenda in Canada. So all of that and so much more as Redacted starts right now. Oh, someone says, imagine being interrogated listening to that music over and over again. The Redacted
no,
music.
thank you.
You know you're in trouble.
No, thank you. It does sort of spawn a certain things are going to be said here. I guess that's what we were going for.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, I think it shines a light. The music helps shine a light on the truth. Hey, someone yesterday Deborah wrote me an email and said, hey, is there a way that I can skip the intro, the 30-minute intro? And I said, well, if you're watching us live, no. I mean, you could skip it by showing up at 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's when the intro is complete because we started 30 minutes early and we are here live right now at 4 p.m. Eastern time. But if you're watching us on replay, all you need to do, there's chapter markers that are set up in our YouTube videos, right, David? We have chapter markers, so you can skip right ahead from the intro in YouTube right to the start of the show. Or if you're watching us on Rumble, I think they have the technique there as well. But if not, you can just scrub ahead 30 minutes and start the show right then.
Well, and I want to put a message out to Deborah that if she figures out how to skip the intro while we're live, please let us know because that's time travel, technically. So
Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
What are you doing? So I just want to remind you who you just spoke to was David. Clayton and I are married.
Saw me cut back there.
And
Go ahead.
yeah, are you ready?
Yeah, it wasn't focused.
Buckle up.
Yeah.
Okay. And we got a tweet this week saying that Philip and David are twins. They're not twins. They're brothers. Philip is away because he is the best pool player in the world. Yeah. So he is playing a tournament to prove that. So we have Grim in his place, who's working really hard and doing an amazing job stepping in because this is a hard show to run. So we appreciate our team. I'm the only lady here. That's why the graphics are so masculine.
That's right. Right.
That's what we do.
Our graphics have balls. That's right.
All right. You know what else has balls is our newsletter.
That's right.
Yes, we have cojones because we write about things that the mainstream media largely ignores. You can find the newsletter at redacted.inc. All you have to do, put in your email address, and then you'll get this authentication email. Click it. tell us that, yes, you want the newsletter, because this is a great resource for you to get the original links to the stories that we cover here so that you can come prepared. You can use it as a study guide. You can use it as an archive. You can use it as a fun email to read and start your day off. We work really, really hard on it. It has a lot of the stories we covered here, plus more. Plus, it's free. It's a free subscription, and it's a great way for us to keep in contact with you. So please do subscribe at redacted.inc.
All right, well, some disturbing reports have emerged from Ukraine over the past few weeks of women being kept in underground bunkers by companies that are making billions of dollars off of the baby farming industry. Yes, baby farming in Ukraine is a booming industry, rakes in billions of dollars, actually. Here is the Swiss-based baby surrogacy company called Biotexcom with a promo video explaining how desperate Ukrainian women can come to their bunkers and have their uteruses turned into a baby-making machine. Watch.
Now I will show you our bomb shelter, where we will transfer our clients and their newborns in case of the outbreak of hostilities in Kiev. Let's go. Here is a toilet.
Here is a toilet.
Here we have a first aid kit. There are all the medications needed to administer first aid. Here you can see gas masks. There are instructions on how to use a gas mask all over the shelter. This bomb shelter can hold up to 200 people who will feel comfortable here. Here is our sitting and bedding zone. There are sleeping bags and beds. It's possible to sit or lie here. We have enough sleeping bags and gas masks for everyone who will stay here. There are shelvings with food, as well as tableware, napkins, diapers, and all the stuff needed for babies. Newborns will feel comfortable here. Everything needed can be done here. Here is our children's area. Here we can place newborn babies. There are special cots prepared for them. There are also cribs for a bit older babies. You can see that babies feel absolutely comfortable here. We have everything needed: diapers, cribs, blankets, clothes, food, everything needed.
But if she's talking in a hypothetical about a bomb shelter, why are there babies there now?
Well, it's not a hypothetical. This is where they are going to have a baby-making factory. This is where you go to be a surrogate. This is, you need a womb, we've got you covered. Go ahead, David.
I was going to say maybe those are just extras. You know, they have these, they make these videos, they bring in people and to set up these shots, so maybe they're just all actors.
Tester babies.
They're actors.
Yeah, tester babies.
Right. The rent a womb business. And call it whatever you want. People in the chat are saying this is absolutely sick. This is what's happening. The rent a womb business is actually booming and is expected to double next year. The amount of money that's brought in on this rent a womb business is expected to double this next year. And the best place to do this right now is in Ukraine, where desperate women are being exploited. The Gray Zone, according to Jeremy Lafredo reporting for the Gray Zone today, quote, surrogates have to be from poorer places than their clients, explained the medical director of Kyiv's largest baby factory. Of course, that makes sense. Here's a direct quote from the Gray Zone's reporting on this. Penchoda of the Swiss-based Biotexcom says the business model that enabled him to build one of the most profitable surrogacy companies in the world is simple exploitation. Quote, we are looking for women in the former Soviet republics because logically the women have to be from poorer places than our clients. Yes, rich people can rent out the wombs. It's no surprise, then, that Biotexcom's quest for rentable wombs has led it to the seemingly endless pool of desperate young women in war-torn Ukraine. 8 years of conflict, combined with the subsequent proxy war between NATO and Russia, has plunged Ukraine into economic disaster. As Ukrainians sank into poverty, their country swiftly emerged as the international capital of the surrogacy industry. Today, Ukraine controls at least a quarter of the global market, despite being home to fewer than 1% of the world's population. How did that happen? Those numbers. Alongside the industry's rise, a seedy medical underworld filled with patient abuse and corruption took hold of the country. But it is worth pointing out that even before the war, the United Nations and other human rights organizations were setting off alarm bells about Ukraine's child trafficking and organ harvesting. They had a big problem. Shortly after 2014, NATO launched its proxy war against the people of the Donbass. We call it a genocide, and it provided the perfect opportunity to use those victims in all sorts of nefarious ways, from organ trafficking to child trafficking. And the world was aware of what was happening in Ukraine. For instance, on your screen right now is a Huffington Post report. 2015. This is a 2015 Huffington Post report that I hunted down today.
Back when the media didn't feel motivated to tell lies about Ukraine.
No.
Yeah, back when you could call Hydra. Back when you could actually use the term and not be suspended for hate speech.
Yeah, you're right. So this is 2015 from the Huffington Post, not exactly a right-wing publication, dropped this bombshell report saying Ukraine's orphanages feeder for child trafficking, reads the headline. Ukraine's orphanages are feeder for child trafficking. The report highlights the findings of a 3-year-long investigation into Ukraine's orphanages and found that children are at risk of being trafficked for sex, labor, and the selling of their organs. Yes, organ harvesting. The report says, quote, some 82,000 children are said to have lived in these facilities, although no one seems to know for sure. Some Ukrainian activists put the number closer to 200,000 children, according to the report. Don't believe it? Well, you don't have to.
It seems so unbelievable, right?
It does. It seems so unbelievable. You don't have to believe it, though. You don't have to listen to their investigation. You can actually visit the U.S. State Department's website right now. Go to the State Department's website yourself, like I did. And you can read right from their own 2014 report. Here's the U.S. State Department report. This is the U.S. State Department's 2014 report on human trafficking. In 2014, the U.S. State Department's Trafficking in Persons report stated that children in orphanages and crisis centers continue to be particularly vulnerable in trafficking within Ukraine. Here's a quote. Take a look at this. About the risks of being involved in criminal activities abroad, the government of Ukraine did not report any investigations or prosecutions of government employees for alleged complicity in trafficking-related offenses during the reporting period, despite reports of corruption in other sectors of the government.
Oh, no?
Now, add to that, like right now, at this particular point in time, we are paying probably some of those people's pensions, salaries, the people that were involved in that, because
The
they're
government
probably still
employees,
there.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's just the money that's on the books.
Right.
All of the money that's funneled there that's off the books and they're receiving. The section on Ukraine in this report is particularly disturbing. It highlights how the government essentially ignores child trafficking and turns a blind eye to it. The U.S. State Department report even says that the Ukrainian government wouldn't even prosecute its own government officials who were involved in child trafficking. If you could imagine anything more troubling than having these children sold off for sex trafficking, imagine their organs being sold off on the black market. You don't have to imagine it. It's actually happening at an increased clip, by the way. Now, you'll recall, well, take a look at this on your screen. So this is a report on the inside the massive multi-billion-dollar global organ trafficking industry. It's massive. And according to the World Health Organization, organ trade is the buying and selling of organs outside of national medical systems and for profit. Global Financial Integrity nonprofit estimates that 10% of all organ transplants, including lungs, heart, and liver, are done via trafficked organs. 10% of them. I think that number is low, according to other reports I've read. But just 10% is enough. If you want a kidney on the black market, by the way, the going rate today, according to the numbers that I researched, you could pay $30,000 to get a black market kidney. $30,000. One kidney is traded on the black market, according to the reports, every hour. Every hour. Last year, Russian authorities discovered that Red Cross They found these Red Cross files in a hospital in Mariupol. Once they took over this hospital, they discovered that files that had children's organs listed on them. According to investigators, according to the reports at the time from Sputnik News, hundreds of medical files found at the Red Cross base contain information on children's healthy organs with no indication of any illnesses. The files also have data on who the child's parents are. Want to make some money? Sell off one of your child's kidneys. $30,000 on the black market. It's a great and highly lucrative business. You know, we had Tim Ballard, and I'll just sort of get us out of here on this point. Like, we had Tim Ballard on the show, who, of course, was featured prominently in the Sound of Freedom show, the movie. Jim Caviezel plays him in the Sound of Freedom. So I asked him about this, and specifically we talked about Ukraine. And one of the multinational rings of child trafficking that he was able to bust up with his team started in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And he went into great detail about that. If you want to seek out more information on that, I encourage you to go watch my full deep dive hour-long interview with Tim Ballard on that specific point. And we got later in the interview to talking about organ harvesting. And he said, thank you for covering this topic. No one wants to talk about it. No one will ask me these questions about it. No one will cover this part of the story. And yet it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And the human trafficking element of this is upwards of $200 billion. So you think about the billions of dollars being made by taking these women, putting them in these bunkers, selling off their babies. This is what's happening before our eyes right now. And you discover these documents, you find these Red Cross documents that Russia says it was going to investigate in Mariupol. I don't know the outset or the outcome of that investigation yet, and if they've been able to confirm that. But it's all very, very troubling. And please sound the alarm on this. Like, we can't be the only show covering this. Please, please, please share this information out there with other people.
I'll say it. Yeah, it does. It just seems almost too much.
But why do people put their head in their sand with this stuff? I just had another interview earlier today about this, and I have to say, it's like we can cover certain things, right? We can cover like big stories, but when it gets down to stuff as unbelievable as this, and we have the data, the U.S. State Department has the data, the United Nations has the data. People put their head in the sand. They're like an ostrich syndrome with this kind of shit.
I think it's because of the...
what do you think, David?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's because of the cancel culture. I think everybody is so, like, they have convinced us on all these different things, COVID, all this stuff, that if we talk about it, we can get canceled. We can get removed from social media. We can get removed from things that we do in our daily lives. And I think a lot of people just look at it as, it's just not worth the risk. You know, it's only the people that are like, you know what, I don't care about the risk. This is something that I'm passionate about. Like me, I don't mind talking about it. I will say it till my face turns blue because I believe that it's something that needs to be talked about. But some people just cannot handle making waves like that.
Right. I feel uncomfortable about it because I'm like, how crazy can one story be? Like, now in Ukraine, we've got the Burisma angle around energy corruption. We've got Hunter Biden. We have now documents about biolabs. We have now this baby harvesting, and all of it seems credible. And it almost seems like we've gone so far from this Putin's a madman and just wants Ukraine for his own, because he's just this nefarious person who wants more and more land, to a story where things make sense, but they feel so uncomfortable to go this far that it's almost like, I just can't keep looking here, right? I feel that way. Like, it's scary and it's so much, it fits and it's awful. And so...
David's in the chat. David's 1133 says, most people are dumb. They're normies, Clayton. Just forget them. I have. Normies. I've never heard that before.
Oh, yeah, I have.
Normies, where people just sort of like blindly walk through the day. I mean, it's like the Matrix in a way, right?
Sure.
It's like there's sort of like the people, they don't want to see it. They want to like live in their own like little world where they go to Target and they come home and they're like, what, child harvesting? I can't even think about it.
Right.
I saw somebody equate it to zombies. Like, there are people walking around as zombies, and I think it's because this country and this world is so medicated. Like, I don't think I know anybody under the age of 40 that is not on some kind of pharmaceutical, and so I feel like we have zombified people. And you talk about like Alex Jones level, water manipulation and stuff. I mean, there are things that they're doing that keep us from being active in a lot of things. I
think
feel.
I think that's a good point. I think
I think there's a million reasons that we're continuing to be zombified. You know, things I talk about with my kids all the time, like you have to work hard to not be made dumber by, you know, your electronics. You have to work hard to not be made fatter by the food show, you know, in the grocery store. Like you have to rein back yourself in because modern life is just not on our side. You have to work hard to be an adult because the world wants you to stay in school until you're 35 and not make any productive decisions. You have to, like, there are a lot of things in the society that we've created that make us more comfortable, but worse. And so for that reason alone, you know, just sort of deeper study is uncomfortable. Conversations like this are uncomfortable. So we appreciate that you're here and your responses, and, you know, hit that like button and share this if you think that other people would like to be involved in a conversation like this. You know, we don't want to talk about this stuff. Nobody wants to.
I wish child trafficking didn't exist.
Sure.
You know, like I would love for that not to be a topic. I would love to open the show one day and say, today we're learning about a garden. People have been planting flowers everywhere because there's no wars. There's no corrupt people doing horrible things. I would love that. I would absolutely love that.
John Krasinski style.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, we have 3,000 likes right now, and there's almost 25,000 of you watching right now, which is the size of a stadium. Think about that, right? That's the size of going to see a performer at a stadium, the amount of people that are watching right now, which is amazing. Please hit that like button and push it up even higher, because it actually pushes us further out in the YouTube algorithm, which they love to suppress us. So please, when you do that, it actually pushes us further out into the algorithm. We've got Patrick Lancaster with a special report on these captured Ukrainian tanks. What is Russia doing with them? Well, wait till you see this. A frontline report on that in just moments. And will Ukraine become the next Middle East? Zelensky's already said he wants to turn Ukraine into the next Israel. Is that what the future holds? That's what the future holds for Ukraine?
Meanwhile, Israel doesn't even want to be the next Israel. There's political parties inside of Israel saying, we're done being best friends with the West now. We're kind of done with this. So is this a good template worth following? Plus, the mainstream media apologizes for misleading us about COVID. Not really. I mean, they admit on this new hot mic leaked tape that they did it wrong, that they were biased. It's not an apology. It's not the apology we're owed that we've been waiting for, but it's something.
But first, guess what? It's a big day in Canada, a big day for one of our partners. They've been with us they've helped promote and sponsor our show now for since the beginning, and our friends over at Moomoo. So it's a very big day because they today have launched in Canada, and you can celebrate with a $100 bonus, a reward for a limited time offer right now through the end of August. If you're in Canada, you can get up to $100. Win up to $100 when you register with Moomoo in Canada. So yes, if you're in Canada, you can sign up. But the rest of you guys can all sign up no matter where you are right now. Go to redacted.inc/Moomoo. And you can open up my favorite trading app and start trading stocks, start using alerts, trade stocks like a pro in no time. Plus, it offers powerful tools often reserved for experienced investors. You get customizable watch list, advanced charting capabilities. So I get alerts throughout the day on my Moomoo app because I have different metals companies that I invest in, silver, gold, different precious metals companies that I follow and keep an eye on what's happening. You can set different alerts. So throughout the day, you can see what's going on in the markets. I like to see what's happening with silver prices and see what's happening on the commodities market, see what's happening with oil prices and things like that. You can do all of that right inside the app, and it's totally free to download. Plus, when you download, you can get up to 16 free stocks. And right now, you can either get a Tesla or a Google stock. That's right, one share of either of those just for opening your account and making your initial deposits. So go to redacted.inc/Moomoo. We'll also have links in the description. Again, that's redacted.inc/Moomoo. One more time, redacted.inc/Moomoo.
I'm Patrick Lancaster, and right now we have a very special report coming to you from the front line. Right now we are between the Zaporozhye front and the Ugledar front. We are in Russian-controlled territory, and in fact, this tank right behind me is a Ukrainian tank from the Azov battalion. But we are with Kaskad, which is a part of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And these Russian soldiers are getting ready to use this former Ukrainian tank that was captured last year to fire against Ukrainian forces here on the front line. We're here with a whole group of Russian forces tanks. We're not sure if we're going to see this one fire or other ones firing, but right now we're going to see them start to prepare this tank for battle, and we're going to talk to the commander and see what the real situation is here on the ground, on the front line, where the mainstream media won't go. So let's take a closer look.
Я командир танка. Позывной мой Сара.
Какая танка это?
Это танк Т-64 «Булат», отобранный в полка Азов на Азовстале.
И как давно вас это?
Этот танк уже больше года находится у нас и выполняет боевые задачи.
Что вы будете делать сейчас?
Сейчас мы сидим на боевом дежурстве, ждем выполнения боевых команд.
Спасибо. Как вы знаете украинский Азов танка?
Ну, во-первых, Т-64 «Булат» находится на вооружении только в Украине. Во-вторых, здесь надписи. Он, походу, и шел только на экспорт. Либо им передала какая-то страна другая. Во-вторых...
как латинский, да?
Ну да, какой-то неизвестный язык. Во-вторых, пиксель украинский.
Ага, русский никак это, да?
Нет, в России совсем другой раскраска. И в-третьих, сзади у них написано, что это был танк полка Азов. Вот здесь, если вы присмотритесь.
Ага, Azov, да?
Да.
Ага, понял. So right here we see the automatic launcher, our loader, you could say. The shells are underneath, and we see where it comes up and loads. Можете сказать, что это Каскад?
Каскад — это боевое подразделение, которому, я считаю, нет равных против украинских солдат. Вообще нет равных.
Ага. Но, как я понимаю, это не частные армии, да?
Нет.
Что это именно?
Это подразделение, которое собрано с множества организаций МВД в одну организацию, которая выполняет чисто боевые задачи.
Ага, как внутренний министр внутренний сделал, да?
Да.
Ага, понял. Можете сказать, вы откуда?
Я сам местный.
Местный...
С Донецка.
Донец, да? Ага. И почему вы воевать?
Ну, 10 лет моей жизни я отдал за то, чтобы мой поселок не страдал, мои дети, жена, мать.
Возле аэропорта, да?
Да.
Ага, моя жена поселок тоже Октябрьский.
Не, я не с Октябрьска, там, где На данный момент мой поселок сейчас очень сильно обстреливается. И, ну, как бы я пошел еще с 2014 года и хочу сказать, пусть лучше украинские войска слаживают оружие и сдаются в плен. Иначе выхода у них нет, как у них будет только смерть.
И что нужно за война закончить?
Что нужно?
Да.
Нужно идти вперед.
Вы слышали, недавно Крымский мост был взрыв?
Да, там погибло 2 человека. Я считаю, это подлый поступок со стороны украинских военных, потому как на нем находятся гражданские люди, это не военный объект, это всего лишь мост, который соединяет Крым и Россию.
Ну вот вообще это как-то может повлиять на ход боевых действий?
Не повлияет ни на снабжение, ни на дух наш, ни на что не повлияет. Мы как выполняли боевые задачи, так и будем их выполнять.
Ну все, спасибо. Можете сказать, что это?
Это Т-64Б, украинский танк.
Тоже украинский?
Да.
Ага, и как давно у вас это?
Тоже год назад, это мы в марте месяце под Волноваха его забрали.
Волноваха.
Да.
So это другое, это за Мариуполь, это за Волноваха.
Да, да, да.
Ну, вижу дырка там, что это, за бой или что?
Ну, попали мальца рядышком. Ну, осколок пробил бак. Так вроде бы ничего критического нету. Машина на ходу, экипаж целый. Все хорошо.
Ну, как момент был, когда вас нашли это лабораторию?
Ну, как, у нас разведка работала. Доложила, где есть скопление техник и куда будет работать артиллерия. И вот самый целый экземпляр к нам достался.
Когда нашли это, никто был?
Никого не было. Это пустая машина была, мы просто на троса оттянули, сами перебрали, все почистили, все покрасили. Вообще его название Монгол. Его так прозывала Вооруженные силы Украины.
Понял. All right. Well, we've shown you 2 different tanks here. There's other tanks that are Russian tanks in the area, and as they said, the commander said, they're waiting on orders to get the word to go into tank battle. All right, it's been several hours since we met with the tank crew, and the orders finally came to the tank group commander to start the tank assault on Ukrainian forces and Ukrainian military positions. So right now we're with the commander headed to the firing positions of at least one of the tanks in the group, and we're going to see how they launch onto Ukrainian military positions. And right now we're going through a very muddy road, just in the middle of nowhere basically. So hopefully we're going to try to get a little comment from the commander here on the road, and then we're going to see what the situation is on the firing position and how the tanks fire on Ukrainian positions. As I said, we've got strict instructions on how to film, no faces. And they said we're only going to be there for a matter of minutes, and it's a very dangerous situation because at any time there could be an answer. Ukrainian forces firing back on that position. So it's a very dangerous situation, but here we go. Можете сказать, что произошло сейчас? Где мы едем?
Именно сказать не могу. Выдвигаемся на огневую позицию. Было замечено перемещение пехоты. Надо ее подавить.
All right, and we're actually behind the tank. It went up in front of us, but we've got a GoPro on the tank so we can see what the status is of the tank itself on the road here before we arrive to the firing position. All right, so we are at the firing position. You just see the first shell going out, and right now the tank battle has begun, and the Russian forces tanks are assaulting Ukrainian forces, and we're here to show you what the real situation is on the ground. We're gonna have a look at a few shots going out. We're not sure exactly how many there's gonna be, but then we're gonna go hopefully have a chat or just see some of the process with the commander. All right, so now we're gonna head back. We've seen some firing. The firing's continuing. We're not sure if there's gonna be incoming right now, but we're gonna move a bit farther back.
Азимут 24, по готовности огонь. Выстрел. Так, еще один, давай еще один.
All right, so we're back to the location where the commander is correcting the firing, and we can hear them and see them doing it now. That's another shell going out. We're just trying to cover as much of this process safely as possible for you. Well,
Принял,
as safe as we
ожидай.
can get.
Азимут 24, по готовности огонь.
So now we're going to go across the field to get a little bit of a different angle on the firing. So we just got word. It's time to go. So I don't know if they're expecting the incoming now or not. И все?
Все.
Как результат?
Результат очень даже положительный, все цели уничтожены.
All right, you see what we can show you of the process of the tanks firing an assault on Ukrainian positions. You see that both Russian tanks and captured Ukrainian tanks are used to make these assaults on the Ukrainian forces. We showed you what we can here on the ground. It's time to wrap this up. I hope we get back all right, but I hope we can wrap this up right now, but if anything else happens on the road, if we're still close to the front line, we'll let you know.
All right, thanks, Patrick, and thanks for the reporting there. Yeah, I mean, this is just another. I had a discussion today with a high-level member of former U.S. military. He said, "This is when you end this war now." And I see so many people in the chat saying, "End this war now." You're throwing these Ukrainians into the meat grinder, knowing that they're not going to win, knowing that they're just being destroyed. And that's exactly what NATO wants. And that's exactly what the UK and that's what the United States want for this
All it
people.
accomplishes is dragging out this war so that people become rich off of it. It's not really helping anybody's
and
lives.
that's
It's
the
not
thing.
improving anybody's life in the Donbass. They'd like to be left alone now. Thank you very much. There is a peace rally scheduled this weekend in, I think, Minnesota or Minneapolis. I'm going to confirm that in a second. David, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, like that soldier said, like all they want them to do is like surrender and stop this. But Ukraine is being pushed by the United States and by Europe and everything to keep going and do this for what?
Yeah.
Like, what is the end result?
Right.
Well, it's the total destruction of Ukraine. So you've literally lost, I've heard estimates today, over 300,000 Ukrainian men destroyed, gone. Over 300,000. So you've destroyed NATO has destroyed an entire generation of Ukrainians. That's what this is. And they know it, and they continue to do it, so that they can then buy up Ukraine. BlackRock can swoop in and buy up its land, take it over, and own it. That's exactly what they want. They don't give a shit about the Ukrainian people. They don't care at all about the fleeing people, the young men who've been conscripted. They don't care about them at all. They're just being used as tools by NATO. That's exactly what's happening here. Make no mistake about it.
The same way that, this has happened in the Middle East when a country serves a purpose for the West and is dragged into war. That's what we're going to talk about next after the break. We're going to talk to a journalist who's been covering these parallels between the wars in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine as a cautionary tale and pointing out the rhetoric that continues to support this and where we should reject it.
James Richard in our chat says he has the Predator icon or avatar like that. He says nobody fights knowing they'll lose. Nobody. Okay, then why are Ukrainian? Are they being lied to? We've seen multiple videos now where they've released. In fact, in the past week, where they're saying we have no weapons. We know we're being thrown into this meat grinder and push for peace. So what are they fighting for then? What exactly are they fighting for?
Well, and the thing is, like we've shown here that if they don't willingly go out there and to look like they're willingly going out there, they dropped a grenade in a bunker of them that were refusing to go.
Yeah,
so
or
it's like
shot in the back.
They're forced to go.
Yeah. So
That's
nobody
a
fights for
thing.
knowing they'll lose. Nobody, unless they're forced to fight, which is exactly the case. So that's the answer, James, I guess.
Yes.
All right, we got more news to get to here on this Wednesday. We will talk about will Ukraine become the next Israel or the next Middle East? And also, we got this ABC hot mic moment about COVID. We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're going up to Canada to cover the LGBTQ plus 97577, whatever it's called now, up in Canada and the agenda. And there is a big pushback from the Muslim population and Christians now taking to protest in Canada about this agenda. We'll get there in a second. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Aura. We want to thank them for sponsoring the show. I have to say, in Japan today, there was an announcement that because of all of the fraud that's affecting elderly Japanese, they're going to take away their bank cards. The government is saying, we're going to take away your bank cards because all of the fraud and the cyber theft that's perpetrating Japanese culture right now. And that's why Aura.com is so powerful in stopping identity theft. And Aura will identify these data brokers that are exposing your information, automatically submit opt-out requests. They'll even find all of this accessible stuff that's been stolen by data brokers who are profiting off of your information on the dark web. Robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, anyone else that wants to learn about you, Aura can find them. And what's amazing is even in just the 14 days you try it for free, try it free for 14 days. And in those 2 weeks, you will be stunned at what Aura will find of your personal information that's being sold on the dark web. And you can submit opt-out information. You can get it removed. Aura is beyond just that. They're also a VPN. They're a password manager. They're real-time credit and identity theft monitoring. So if something is like pinging your credit report, you're like, what is this? They'll send you an alert to let you know what's going on. And if you had verified it or authorized it or not, you'll get 5 new alerts. You get an alert saying, hey, we've had 5 alerts for you. You better check this out. So right now, I want you to try it free for 14 days. Go to aura.com/redacted. Aura.com/redacted is the place to go. Try it free for 2 weeks with our link, and you'll be shocked at how much of your private information Aura finds exposed over those 2 weeks. Once again, Aura.com/redacted.
Is Ukraine destined to be the next Middle East, meaning a place to tear down and manipulate governments by the West, destroy economies? Our guest today is Palestinian-American journalist Ramzi Baroud. He recently issued a warning to the world that Washington's Middle East strategy is destroying Ukraine. So what can we learn from this, given we have been through something similar, bringing us war to our doorstep? So I appreciate this take very much, and I wanted him to share it with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Nathan.
So are you saying that the U.S. is replaying its Middle East strategy in Ukraine? Can you explain that?
That's right. The United States relationship with the rest of the world, mostly the Middle East. The Middle East is usually this perfect model of American foreign policy gone away. And we have seen every model or every piece of the American foreign policy puzzle kind of manifesting itself in various parts of in the Middle East over various periods of time. Like, whatever we want to learn about U.S. foreign policy, whether in the South Sea or in South America, you are going to find some version of that puzzle has already taken place in the Middle East at one point in time, but mostly in the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. The advent of the neoconservative foreign policy and its kind of chokehold sort of control over governments one after the other, starting really mostly with W. Bush, though evidence of the neoconservative influence on American foreign policy existed prior to Iraq War 2003, in fact, all the way back to Serbia. But we also see it kind of manifesting itself in the Biden administration, making the same mistakes and following the same blueprint once more, and not kind of being completely oblivious to the lessons that should have been learned, but are being repeated, sometimes to the letter in Ukraine at the moment.
Now, some of the parallels you drew, I thought, okay, let's play this out, because we are in the middle of it now, and we like to feel like, oh, we were sold the Iraq War. Pretty much no one today thinks like, yeah, that was a good idea. Glad we did that. And yet we are swallowing the narrative again with just new players. So we had Saddam as a madman. That was the narrative. Now we have Putin as a madman. Both had been allies of the United States when it was convenient, and then became the bad guys when it was needed. So why do you think Westerners are falling for this again?
Well, because quite often the centerpiece of this discussion is the wrong discussion. Quite often we discuss whether Saddam Hussein is a good or a lie. Gaddafi, Milosevic, Putin. It's not the issue. This is not what American foreign policy is motivated by. The U.S. has invaded Iraq not because of the energy sources, but because of the strategic and geopolitical control and manipulation of the energy sources, and for other reasons, including Israel and their allies in the region and so forth. But unfortunately, all of these years, we have been discussing Iraq in terms of democracy, human rights, state building. Can you enforce democracy from the outside? Can you force to bring stability to a region and so forth and so on? And that has provided the neocons with the perfect academic platforms. I mean, being promoted throughout the years as public intellectuals, speaking about morality and ethics and violence, so preemptive, so forth and so on. But really been discussing this in terms of imperialist drive for energy sources in the Middle East. That should have been the discussion all along. So this is why the general public disagree with the Iraq War but they haven't really agreed. We don't have this consensus as to why we actually invaded Iraq in the first place. And if you follow the narrative and the line of logic, you find that in the beginning, Iraq supposedly to restore some sort of an existing democracy. And then we went in Iraq because we needed to make those bad oppressive Sunnis, are put in their place, and the Shias are giving deserved political status. Then we wanted to support one type of Shia against another Shia sect. I am talking about Sistani versus Muqtada Sadr. And we keep changing storyline time and again. And equally, we basically settled on this. Iraqis cannot accommodate democracy. This is not Scandinavia. We've done the best we can do for those people being ungrateful. It's not our fault somewhere else. So there has never been a process of self-introspection even from the Iraq invasion of 2003, from the first Iraq 1991 until this day. There has never been a public discussion on why we went to Iraq in the first, why we stayed in the East, how we destabilized the region, and instability continue to lurk in various parts of the East, including Syria and other parts of the Middle East. We ended up being the victims, and everybody's responsible for that mess. And the same story is going to play out. In fact, parts of that is already playing out in Ukraine.
Right. Well, we see that one of the theories of Stephen Gowans, who writes about Syria in Washington's Long War on Syria, was that one of the main reasons the United States was interested in Syria and Iraq and Libya is because leaders there were interested in a united Arab bloc, for lack of a better word. They wanted Middle Eastern prophets for Middle Eastern people. They wanted to basically unify themselves with other Middle Eastern regions, and the United States felt very threatened by that. We absolutely now see this happening in Ukraine because the united Ukraine with Russia, with China, is very scary to the West. And so the need to disrupt there is great. And you're right in that we never had a postmortem on how those wars were awful. And so we're free to do another one, I suppose. And so we all sort of accept it like, oh, okay, war just keeps coming. It's not our fault, right? So
that's right.
This attitude that we are allowing ourselves like, wow, just look at this war breaking out as if like we have no say in it, is something that I appreciated a lot. Now, you had said that, where is it? That, yeah, the United States were kind of shocked that the Shias were not as cooperative as the Americans wanted them to be. Can we draw this parallel with the SBU? Do you think they will be controllable are those the players that you see here, or do I have it wrong?
No, you have it absolutely right. I don't think the U.S. will be able to actually reap the outcome of that war in any beneficial way for the United States, as if we are quite good at managing conflicts when they are still in the realm of conflicts. But when it's reaping the results and the fruit of that labor, and I'm not even a moral stance on any of these issues, I'm even thinking from an American point of view, ultimately it's all about dominance, geopolitics, expanding our military bases from 750 or 800 to 1,000, keeping Russia in the corner, keeping the Chinese and so forth and so on. But even that point of view, the Middle East teaches us that there has been little rewards as far as U.S. foreign policy is concerned. So because we know that there will be no rewards, we in perpetuating the ability and the violence as if we are postponing the declaration of that chaos until a later date. Mm-hmm. And this has really been the main problems of American foreign policy, even prior to the takeover of the neoconservatives. American foreign policy prior to that, we just can't get any done with our stable or destabilizing. So we kind of have this continuous chaos, and that chaos is at display in the Middle East. What is Israel doing in Syria right now? Well, aside from stealing some oil from the northern regions, but they are not really serving any particular geopolitical. In Syria is finally getting its after other powers have proven to be far more consequential as far as the Syrian, as far as the civil war is concerned. The U.S. has clearly become a very marginal force in Syria, but they are not go. They're going to stay there until they are pushed out to the last soldier. The thing happened in Afghanistan, and we have actually seen the last soldier, boarding the air and taking off with Afghanis hanging on the airplanes in one of the most tragic scenes in American foreign policy. But the same thing is happening in Syria, and I dare say will happen in the Ukraine as well.
Now, Zelensky has said he wants Ukraine to be the next Israel. By that, I guess what he means is, ally to the West and disruptor of the region, I suppose. What do you think that means? And now we see, the increasing appetite inside of Israel to not be the Israel to the United States. So what do you think of that comparison?
That's really interesting. This whole conversation about the city guarantees and making Ukraine the next Israel. And as you said, this is happening at a time where Israel itself is itching for a redefinition of itself and in relations to the United States and to, and this feud going between Netanyahu and Biden, and the fact that Biden is yet to receive the Israeli right-wing prime minister to the White House. And during this time, they are idealizing the Israeli model as if it has been the greatest story. But I tell Zelensky, this is not going to work out. And if the U.S. gives you whatever version of security Zelensky wants, it's not going to work out for one very simple reason, is that Israel has managed to redefine its relationship with the United States from being a client regime back in the 60s, perhaps, all the way to a so-called third. And some people argue because of the power, the pro-Israeli, not just Israeli lobby in Washington, but also the people of Israel within the U.S. government itself. It's very difficult for Zelensky to replicate this model. He would have to spend years and years recreating the infrastructure that Israel has created with American political system. This is not a choice. A security agreement is not going to make Ukraine the next Israel, no matter how badly Zelensky wants this. But I think the conversation security guarantees is some sort of a middle ground. Can't give you a NATO membership at the moment, but perhaps we can satisfy you with some kind of a secure guaranteed agreement. And I personally don't think it's going to go anywhere if an agreement is being the relationship between the US are so different and so unique, so particular that it can't simply be duplicated.
Yeah. Well, I find this to be just, it's a really apt comparison. And so I'm so glad that you came here to draw it for us. And, I think it's worthwhile for all of us to break down these propaganda narratives so that we don't just sort of sit by while these things continue to replicate and destroy countries, economies, people's lives and families. So thank you so much for breaking this down for us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, good to talk to you. You can follow, where can we follow you? On it is X or Twitter a good place, or somewhere else?
It's Ramzi Baroud, Ramzi Baroud at Twitter.
Okay, very good. Thank you again. Good to talk to you as always.
Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, I hope we'll have to have Ramzi back on. We can get his internet connection better or something.
I apologize. That was choppier than I had anticipated, but great content there. So thanks for sticking with it. And you can seek out his work and his own channel as well. I was going to say something about that, and it just slipped my mind.
All right. Well, we've got more news to get to here on this Wednesday. We're going to be covering the latest on COVID and when reporters actually tell the truth on a hot microphone. Wait till you see what an ABC reporter had to say on a hot microphone. Also, we're going to be looking at Justin Trudeau in Canada pushing the LGBTQ plus T9Y agenda and what the Muslim population is doing to say enough is enough. And we just got word a few minutes ago that Justin Trudeau announcing he's getting divorced or separated from his wife of 20 years. And a lot of people in the comments section for his tweet, he put out a statement saying you're getting separated after 20 years. And he said, we ask you for your privacy. And many people in the comments section were saying we would like a divorce from you in Canada.
Right.
So that was the retort up in Canada. Let us know your thoughts on that. So we'll be covering all of that and more. But first...
Oh.
Yeah, we'd love to tell you about our friends over at Lear
Sorry.
Capital.
Yes, we do want to tell you about our friends over at Lear Capital. It's no secret if you're tuned in, then you know that experts are predicting a recession heading our way, layoffs already happening, and the government is ready to print more money, further devaluing the U.S. dollar. While last year was terrible for most investors, 2023 could be even worse. Unless you were smart and invested in gold, then you were protected from loss, while other investments fell. If the experts are right and we do get hit with a recession, 2023 is looking even better for gold and silver investors. So if you're interested in gold, then our friends over at Lear will help you start purchasing precious metals or converting part of your IRA or your 401k into a gold and silver IRA. You can call Lear Capital today at 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com. Right now, if you buy 1 ounce of gold, Lear Capital is giving away a free ounce of silver. That's incredible. Literally free silver that you can keep or sell immediately. Do whatever you want. There are a lot of gold companies to choose from, and Lear Capital has over 25 years of experience, thousands of 5-star reviews, and a risk-free guarantee that gives you 24 hours to review your purchase before committing to it. Lear Capital is a top choice when buying gold and silver, so call them today. Again, that's 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com and get your free gold and silver investor guides and receive up to $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase. So again, to learn more, call 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com.
Well, an ABC News journalist caught on camera exposing the lies that his network was telling to the world about COVID-19. The ABC in question, though, is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, not America's ABC. This week, a group of reporters were on hand for the Osman press conference for U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He was there to speak. Here was the folks at the press conference. Here you can see the ABC reporter, Stephen Gedgetz, sitting there on the far right, waiting for the news conference, and see him there like looking down at his laptop. And he's there with Matthew Nocht and the Sydney Morning Herald and the Australian's Ben Packin. They're all there. They're all doing their thing at this press conference, waiting for Antony Blinken to arrive. The cameras were all set up, ready for Antony Blinken to speak. Here's a close-up of Gedgetz from his Twitter bio. Here's a close-up of him. Well, the microphones were hot, and these three men decided to talk about how their media organizations had handled the COVID-19 coverage. ABC's Stephen Gedgetz then makes a shocking admission, calling out his own network for failing to investigate the origins of COVID, which the U.S. intelligence agencies began in a laboratory in Wuhan, China. He starts out by calling out Sky News's Sherry, whose Australian COVID coverage has been phenomenal. She's been exposing the lies surrounding it for quite a long time now.
Her name is Sherry Markson.
Sherry Markson, yeah.
And it's somebody that they had basically Tucker Carlsoned. Like, hey, she's crazy. Let's not listen to her, and what they admit here is, yeah, we loved calling her crazy, but damn it, if she's not turning out to be right. This is a narrative that we can repeat for pretty much every COVID narrative. It doesn't matter that they're Australian. Other Western journalists have had this conversation as well. And so what they're saying here is like, well, we wouldn't say it to her face, but she turned out to be right.
So they basically call her unhinged, but correct. Yes, she's nuts, but actually she got the story correct. Listen.
Shari's latest. Shari's COVID stuff. Just weekends.
Amazingly, she is looking more and more like
it's gone in phases.
It's just annoying.
It's gone in phases.
Such a pit bull, and she's so unhinged, and yet she might still be right.
And look, I would definitely say it's still definitely
Can you be
unresolved,
unhinged and still right?
It's persuasive.
It's looking less.
How does she know it wasn't a bat?
She doesn't. No one does.
But it is the location is extremely suspicious.
It's
obviously.
Yeah.
I know. You don't want to let the Chinese off the hook, do you?
I feel like I remember being super dismissive of that very early. Not even very early on. For a good while, I was like, that is just the most unhinged thing ever. And I reckon I was overly influenced by the fact that there were some truly nasty and crazy people who were already deep down the rabbit hole. I probably didn't look at it dispassionately enough.
Okay, that in and of itself, though, we should pause on, is an amazing admission about how anything connected to anyone that smelled of a conspiracy, the media dismissed because they had this elitist attitude that they were above it. And so they didn't have to be curious about anything because they had the monopoly on the narrative. And that is incredibly condescending, elitist, and damaging. And they owe us an apology for it. That admission, that sort of dismissive, like, we got it wrong, we weren't being humble enough, means they should not be journalists, means that anyone with that attitude should not be journalists. Just today on John Campbell's Rumble channel and YouTube channel, he talked about why the mainstream media is not curious about adverse reactions around COVID. He's saying these things now are real studies and the media won't pick it up for it. And this is the explanation for why. Because they kind of laugh about it and say, we couldn't get close to validating anything that was not mainstream. We just couldn't even circle it. We couldn't even sniff it out. So what are they then other than propagandists? Because they're not journalists.
Do you think it's possible that journalism school has completely changed how they're pumping these people out, that they're more order takers than they are? Because are they encouraged not to look beyond the stories that they're given at this point in time? Because it seems like
when you think about liberal universities, like what exactly, what is in the public interest, what is in the public good, and what are these liberal organizations, these liberal universities actually teaching journalism students? It's a farce. I mean, and you called him a journalist. I mean, is he a journalist? He's literally there at a Antony Blinken press conference as a stenographer for these people. The people that get invited to those press conferences are stenographers for the empire.
But under the guise of being a journalist.
Under the guise of it, but they're not actual journalists, are they?
Yeah,
they work for these.
If you were an actual journalist, you would question everything that even came down from your own organization. You would be like, okay, this is coming down. I have a brain. I'm going to go look. This lady said this. We're all making fun of her. But at least explore it. You have to even go down the rabbit hole if you're a journalist of the things that people say that sound crazy, because a lot of times there's some truth there. You have to go down all of that to get to the ultimate truth.
Right. We've covered on this show certain journalistic organizations that started to release guidelines and training programs for news organizations saying that objectivity is biased or objectivity is an artifact of white male privilege. And that truth seeking is racist and that kind of thing, that like we literally cannot ascribe to these journalistic ethics anymore because it is rooted in white male supremacy or some kind of bullcrap like that. So yes, there is this sort of dismantling of truth seeking happening in certain areas, but the lack of humility and the fact that they sort of laugh off, like, we didn't really look at that, dispassionately, ha, ha, ha. Well, that's only one aspect of the pandemic. That's just COVID origins, right? And people were punished for saying that COVID may have originated in a lab. People were taken off social media and called crazy and not given real explanations for what we collectively have gone through. But let's take this to another area of the pandemic when we talk about mask requirements or vaccine mandates or vaccine adverse reactions. This attitude 100% translates to all of those other things that the media is still saying we can't get close to it because conspiracy theorists are already there. We cannot even touch it. But their job is not to moralize what the narrative is and say we don't like it because we don't like the people attached to it. Their job is just to look at the truth. That's it.
Right.
And so this capriciousness with which they're laughing off the way they handled the pandemic is exactly what, if the mainstream media wants to regain our trust and regain any ground, they need to apologize for. This needs to be public, not on a hot mic secretly.
Well, as the people in our chat are pointing out, as a good journalist, you don't get distracted, right? And so if I was, and as you're distracted by this, like that, you're not a journalist then. If you're distracted by this, then you're not following journalistic ethics. That's not something you do. Get distracted by these narratives from your companies, So
yeah, it's uncomfortable when you're like, oh, the way this is being presented online looks kind of crazy. Then you don't say, I'm not going to go there because I don't want to actually. I mean, I have felt that way. Like I see in my head these colleagues that I worked with at mainstream media, and I'm like, oh, if they could see me like going down this rabbit hole, they'd laugh, and they'd be like, oh, look, you're going into.
But they don't have to do
place,
any of that.
right?
That's the thing. They don't have to do it. As someone else pointed out in our chat, these journalists are just pretty faces on TV most of the time. They're not actual journalists. They're not doing any actual reporting. They're sitting there as stenographers for Empire. They're not. They're not like gumshoeing
readers.
Yeah, they're teleprompter readers. They're prostitutes. That's one of our favorite Ava Bartlett comments. These journalists on TV are just prostitutes. That work for these organizations. They're not actually doing journalism, pulling the thread.
Could you imagine? Yeah, I mean, could you imagine if you were part of a news network and they handed you a certain thing to say? Like, I would have to think that the three of us would be like, "There's no way I'm saying this."
Right.
But we've seen what happens. There's been people on CNN. There was a girl that wanted to cover stuff that was happening in Afghanistan. She lost her job over it because she did not want to say what was on the script. And these people know that going into it. I mean, look what happened at Fox News, with Rupert Murdoch. All those people that didn't get on board with exactly what was supposed to happen were let go.
Right. Yeah. So let's go back and continue playing that soundbite if we can. I don't know if we can. If not, let's re-rack it though, so we cut it off halfway through. Go ahead and play it.
Oh. Okay. All right. Well, they go on to talk about a.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
I'll re-rack it.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I'll re-rack it manually.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. It was the, okay.
Hold, please.
The hot mic, right?
That one. Yep.
It's a good word. Shari's COVID. Just weakens.
Amazingly, she is looking more and more like she
it's gone in phases.
It's just annoying.
It's gone in phases.
She's such a pit bull and she's so unhinged, and yet she might still be right.
And look, I would definitely say it's still definitely
Can you be
unresolved,
unhinged and still right?
It's persuasive.
It's looking less.
How does she know it wasn't a bat?
She doesn't. No one does.
But the location is extremely suspicious.
It's
obviously. I know. You don't want to let the Chinese off the hook, do you?
I feel like I remember being super dismissive of that very early. Not even very early on. For a good while, I was like, that is just the most unhinged thing ever. And I reckon I was overly influenced by the fact that there were some truly nasty and crazy people who were already deep down the rabbit hole. I probably didn't look at it dispassionately enough.
It became weirdly ideological.
Yeah, well, it just became very Trumpy.
Which it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You sort of had.
Well, even the attacks on Fauci and stuff.
Yeah.
It's sort of
Trumpy.
Stuff,
but you sort of had the three sort of theories there that natural.
Yeah.
The Chinese were monkeying around with the virus.
Yeah.
Or they released it as a bioweapon sort of thing, and that was
the bioweapon stuff was always unhinged,
it got caught up.
And that sort of got.
As opposed to a lab leak.
No one rational took that seriously, but it sort of meant
it sort of fed into the lab leak stuff or became associated with it.
Yeah,
Okay,
no one
again,
rational really let that. No one rational really went down that rabbit hole.
You don't rank stories based on how crazy you are. You look into them. That's what journalism is. It's not like, oh, the Fauci stuff was too Trumpy, so we just couldn't touch that because of this value judgment. You know, the bioweapon stuff seemed too crazy, so we could. I mean, in a perfect world, journalists would be saying, yeah, that stuff, well, our colleague so-and-so looked into it and found this, or I read this about it, or about this. Like, that's not a rational discussion. That's only moralizing based on what you want, your own bias.
So Sherry responded to this. Let's listen to Sherry's response to them calling her unhinged and crazy, but actually in the end correct. Watch.
Look, nice to hear my colleague Ben Packham defending my coverage, but calling me unhinged and a pit bull, well, I describe my investigative book, my features, my documentary, my dozens of world-exclusive articles as careful and forensic. I've interviewed hundreds of people, both on and off the record, including whistleblowers, Wuhan sources, intelligence officials, government insiders, investigators, and more. I've spent hundreds of hours of my time away from my children, or when I should have been sleeping late at night and very early in the morning, to investigate this because I felt, and I still feel, it's incredibly important to know the origins of the pandemic. But more importantly, did you hear that astonishing admission about why Stephen Jedgetz, the ABC's foreign affairs reporter, why he didn't look into this story? Because of ideology.
Yeah, because of ideology. That's the heart of it all,
Let me get this right.
right?
What she did was journalism.
Right, exactly. And they were mocking her for it. And she's unhinged for actually doing journalism.
Yeah, and that pit bull part reeks of sexism. Like, that lady, she's doing work.
Right.
We're not, so she's a real pit bull.
What's she out there calling people and doing interviews to find out and confirm or deny information? What is that about? She's a pit bull. No, she's a reporter. That's what you do to get to the bottom of it. So when will the mainstream media companies apologize for pushing this COVID narrative, carrying the water for the big pharmaceutical companies, covering up this story, the lies they were telling their audiences despite knowing the truth? It would be amazing. It would be amazing. And here are some final thoughts from Sherry on that very question.
I mean, the ABC is meant to serve public interest and public interest journalism, and the origins of the pandemic, what was unfolding in Wuhan, is absolutely in the public interest, with 7 million people who have now died. But this stunning admission that a journalist didn't consider or investigate it because of ideological reasons. Paul Barry and the ABC's medical expert Dr. Norman Swan also dismissed a lab leak. And this attitude seems to have permeated the ABC. It's a disservice to our society, and it's a shame that public interest journalism wasn't pursued.
Yeah. Like what on this show, we pull the threads of Fort Detrick, or Fort Derrick. Fort Detrick, yeah. Fort Detrick, and pulling those threads. And, it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't matter if it's uncomfortable. We did it. We covered that story, and we dove deeply into it. And we will continue to do so wherever the facts may lead. And that shouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. And you shouldn't be distracted by anything else, And if the intelligence agencies tell you it's lab leak and it's Wuhan, okay, great. Question that. Yeah. Question everything. We should be questioning everything.
Right.
Well, and what's really weird is like that kind of thinking, that kind of journalism is now considered ultra right wing. Anybody that's talking about the things they're talking about, anybody that's talking about the things we talk about, we are considered ultra right wing now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
For objective journalism.
Yeah, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're crazy. I mean, I have friends that have would post on social media, would post on Facebook, would post on Instagram, and they were saying the stuff that we say here on this show, and they've lost friends over it. Mm-hmm. They've lost friends over it, and they're like, it's unbelievable. They have family members that won't talk to them anymore. They're called conspiracy theorists and so forth, and then guess what? They were right.
Yeah.
They were right. Do those people come back and apologize? It's almost like you wonder if the news networks will come around and apologize the way that maybe family members or friends maybe will like, hey, John, you were right about COVID. You were right about masks.
I can tell you firsthand, none of mine have.
I have apologized to people for those things.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got more news to get to here on the show. We're going to look at this latest of Trudeau pushing the LGBTQ agenda up in Canada. And
while his heterosexual relationship goes bust.
Yeah. Is he coming out about something in Canada? Be interesting to see what happens up there in Canada. He just announced his separation from his wife after 20 years. So what's happening there? Is he going to come out as non-binary? Maybe that's next for him. Maybe that's why he's pushing the LGBTQ plus agenda.
Maybe he
there.
likes costuming.
Yeah.
So maybe he wants to do that.
And he likes Klaus Schwab. He likes costuming and Klaus Schwab.
Yeah. All right. We're going to get to that. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Genucel. Because if you look in the mirror and you see those dark spots, you know they're not going away on their own. So we are introducing the Dark Spot Corrector from Genucel right in time for summer. The Dark Spot Corrector, with not one but 3 cutting-edge ingredients, goes to work fast to target sunspots, dark spots, liver spots, and even old discoloration, both on your face and hands. You'll be amazed to see how quickly you see results. You can enjoy your summer sun, beach, and barbecues without embarrassing spots. With Genucel, you'll see the results of your money back or your money back, no questions asked. So go to Genucel.com/redacted right now. Get your dark spot corrector with the new Genucel Most Popular package featuring summer essentials like the best-selling Ultra Retinol Moisturizer with a powerful retinol alternative for safe use in the summer sun. Now, once again, that URL is Genucel.com/redacted for these amazing summer essentials and save over 70% off Genucel's most popular packages. So don't wait. Order Genucel's right now most popular package with free shipping, free returns, and the best luxury skincare you've ever used, all at 70% off. That's Genucel.com/redacted. Once again, Genucel.com/redacted. All orders will include a mystery luxury gift while supplies last at Genucel.com/redacted.
Well, to Canada now, where the Trudeau government is pushing the LGBTQ plus LTY agenda in the nation's school system. If you're enrolling your children right now in preschool or kindergarten, you'll be told, hey, they won't be addressed as he or she. That's something the school systems are doing. Parents are being notified of this. They won't be given them biological pronouns. The kids will instead need to eventually decide what they will be called, despite what the parents want. Yes, this is happening in Canada. The most vocal critics of Trudeau's policies in Canada are coming largely from the Muslim population, telling Trudeau to keep your ideology away from our children. Protests have been erupting across Canada, and now Muslim activists are joining together with Christians in order to stage a 1 million-person march across Canada in September, calling on people of all faiths to come out and denounce this gender ideology in schools. David Creighton has been writing about this at the Post Millennial and joins us now. And David, you just had a really fascinating interview with the organizer of this 1 million-person march. This is Kamel El-Sheikh, who's organizing this, trying to bring together all faiths to march on the Trudeau government and say enough is enough. What did you find?
Well, I was fascinated because I looked up Kamel El-Sheikh after I discovered he was the motivator, the chief motivator behind all of these protests that we've been experiencing here in Ottawa. And they've been massive protests. And he has been coordinating with other Muslims across Canada, primarily in Calgary and in the Maritimes. So when he told me about this 1 million-person march, I first thought, well, you know, that's optimistic because a lot of people talk about these 1 million-man or 1 million-person marches. But when he told me the network he has created, that this isn't just going to be Ottawa, it's going to be from coast to coast, I think this is a realizable objective. And, you know, the question I first asked when Muslims started taking to the streets and literally had children were stomping on the gay pride flag, I said, this is a real conundrum for the Trudeau government and for Justin Trudeau, because he always talks about Islamophobia. And he talks about transphobia. So which phobia is going to trump the other? Clearly, homophobia is trumping Islamophobia, and transphobia is trumping Islamophobia. But that's what happens when you have a country that is no longer subject just to the rule of law, but to identity politics.
So in your interview with El Sheikh, he was specifically talking about this agenda being foisted on children. And I think he even shared photographs with you showing some of these school pamphlets that are being handed out to children. Can you talk about that? What does it say?
Yeah, that's the first time I think we've publicly released some of this literature. And he sent me these screenshots that he had taken of the pamphlets that are being given to Muslim children. So it not only proves that the education system is targeting Muslim children, it shows that they're trying to demonstrate, which whatever means possible, that there's somehow a correlation between being a Muslim and being a member of the LGBT community. And clearly there is a contradiction there with the Quran, as there is with the Bible. And the Muslims are saying that stop pretending that this should all be self-evident to children, and stop indoctrinating our children into ideas and theology, really. This is ideology and theology that is contrary to basic Muslim beliefs. And I think it's interesting that the Muslims have finally had enough of this. And in this country, we've not seen the pushback from evangelical Christians and conservative Catholics over this. But I think the movement that Camille has begun here is going to bring a religious unity to Canada that we've never seen before. It's going to unite Protestants, evangelicals, Roman Catholics, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, all of which are beginning to say there's something wrong with children being forced to be indoctrinated into this ideology. And I think this is where this is going. I think it's going to be a beautiful outcome of unity amongst all faiths and races.
I would love that. I absolutely hope that Canada leads the charge on this. That would be amazing. One of the things that El Sheikh told you in your interview, he talked about the school system, and he was curious of why the Trudeau government is so obsessed with teaching sexuality to children and basically lying to these children and not even focusing on education. They're more concerned with sort of handing out these sexualized pamphlets to children. Even handing out one pamphlet says, "Can I still be a Muslim if I'm queer?" And we've seen some of the horrible books that are being also put inside of Canadian schools as well with the imagery, and it's shocking stuff.
Well, if this was a heterosexual movement pushing pornography in the schools, it would never have gotten off the ground. But somehow this is allowable if it's all under the banner of the LGBTQ plus movement. And some of the material that children are being exposed to is just so vile. And yet we don't seem to be able to teach children how to read or write or add. And the school system in Canada is as bad as I read about the school system in the United States, because they're so obsessed with teaching children how to masturbate and how to view sexually explicit materials that they've forgotten what the purpose of education is. And this is a tragedy. And it's a tragedy foremost for the children in Canada who are being denied a proper and basic education and being exposed to things that at one time you couldn't find on the street, but they're being digested in the classroom. And this really is a travesty. And thank God there's enough concerned parents out there who say we need to save our children and save their minds from this indoctrination.
What has El Sheikh? What has been his conversations with the Trudeau administration? Is the Trudeau administration concerned that they're going to see this 1 million-person march across Canada denouncing their gender ideology pushing in schools?
They should be concerned, because there's a poll released last week, and I included this in my post-millennial article, that there's now a plurality of immigrants, of Canadians who were not born in this country, that are voting conservative. It's like 48% versus 38% that are voting liberal. Now, this is a complete transformation of the political process in Canada, where the liberals, like the Democrats in the United States, always assumed if they brought in enough immigrants, they would get their votes. Not happening anymore. It's the immigrants, the new immigrants in Canada, who are saying, we came to Canada to get away from indoctrination, to get away from thought control, to get away from censorship. All of these things the Trudeau government is pushing on this country. So it's the new immigrants who are pushing back the hardest. So I think Trudeau has a lot to be worried about. And if this million-person march comes off, as I believe it will, I think that might be a wake-up call. But he cannot change. He cannot change his ideology because he is too much invested in it, and he will go down with that ship.
One of the big issues, of course, that they're fighting against is this idea that children could change their gender without telling their parents. Well, you can never change your gender, of course, but that they could go and receive some sort of surgery without telling their parents, or simply change their pronouns without telling their parents. And of course, Christian leaders and Muslim leaders in Canada are opposed to this. But the Muslim side of this has been much more outspoken. Have you been surprised? Maybe on the Christian side of this, you're starting to hear more and more vocal leadership speaking out against this, are you not?
We're beginning to, but it's taken far too long. Because if you consider the fact that 12-year-olds in this country, and any country that I'm aware of, they don't vote, they can't own firearms, they can't drink, they can't do a lot of things that adults can do. But however, they can decide to change their gender and literally change their sex. And this is absolutely outrageous. They can be chemically castrated without even telling their parents that this process is beginning. And this is outrageous. And if Christians aren't upset about this, if they haven't said, I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore, I don't know what's wrong with them, because it's time for parents to say, we're losing a generation of children to a liberal ideology that is toxic and that is literally destroying children's lives. You can't make decisions on your gender at 12 years old because it's so consequential. It is so long-term, and it's devastating. And we should not be allowing this to happen, at least without parental consent or knowledge. And this is the nanny state gone mad. We have Trudeau saying the state has a right to make these decisions on behalf of your children. The children don't need to talk to their parents because as long as the teachers are aware of it, it's okay.
Unbelievable. It's really, it's stunning. It's like a world I don't even recognize anymore. My father passed away at 86 years old just a few short years ago, and I think, my gosh, if he were alive today, he wouldn't even recognize this world. It's really, really stunning. So good for... Go ahead.
I say the same thing all the time. It's not the world or the country that I was even born in, and so much has changed so radically over the last three decades. It's alarming. But Canada is also the home of assisted suicide. So on the one hand, we're killing people because they're depressed. We're killing people because they just want to die, but we're destroying the younger generation at the same time. And it is a sad story, but the hopeful thing is that people are fighting back. And if it took the Muslims, and what's interesting is the left is adopting the same talking points that the far right used to use against the Muslims. They're saying every Muslim is a terrorist. Every Muslim wants jihad. Every Muslim wants Sharia law. They're using the same toxic talking points that were once reserved for the far right. It just goes to show you how desperate they are, is that they will use this kind of hateful language. And by the way, Camille was banished from Twitter the night after we did that interview. Now, is this a coincidence? I don't think so, because the response was phenomenal. And he has been targeted by the LGBTQ mafia in this country. There are literally dozens of people who were checking his Twitter account to find one tweet that could have been construed as hateful because they want him silenced. And they're after other Muslims as well. I'm interviewing a Muslim woman who has a PhD. She's a civil engineer, and her job is in danger because she's being attacked on Twitter as a hateful Muslim every day. And this is how desperate the left is.
Well, we hope that this rally, this million person march to protest against gender ideology and Pride Month in schools can take hold. That's going to happen on September 20th as Canadians from all faiths from coast to coast come out on this. So we hope that this is a wake-up call in Canada, and hopefully something will change David Creighton has been following this and doing a great job as always. David, great to see you. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, thanks again, David, and thanks to all of you for subscribing to the channel, whether it's on Rumble, whether it's on YouTube. We really, really appreciate it. And, we don't ask you to do much, but if you would be so kind to just subscribe and even share the show with someone that you think could use maybe a little kick in the pants, open their eyes to some of this stuff, covering the things that they don't get to see when they're watching CNN. Text it to a friend that you know is like a big CNN watcher. That would be great. So all you need to do is click on the share icon and share our show out with somebody. That would be wonderful. But again, please subscribe to the show. It's very, very easy to do, and it's totally free. I know the idea of subscribe thing, you think you have to pay money. You do not. It's free, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Rumble. Just click the join button there if you'd like and follow us there. So thank you for recently pushing us past 2 million subscribers on YouTube and close to 400,000 now on Rumble. And it means the world to us. But it really means, I think, getting these stories out to a broader audience. And that's what this is all about. So thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you for joining us every night at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We are live at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So set your clock there, set your reminders, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time for another big show on our Thursday. Have a great night, everyone.